There comes a moment in every man's life when he suddenly realizes something terrifying. The more he explains himself to people, the less they actually hear him, and the less they respect him. It's a silent truth no one warns you about, because the world benefits when you stay uncertain, apologetic, and afraid of being misunderstood. But you're here now, and I'm going to tell you something most men never learn until their confidence is already broken. When you stop explaining yourself, everything changes. Not because you become cold or distant, but because you finally step into the version of yourself that people can't manipulate, guilt trip, or emotionally corner anymore. You've spent years trying to justify your choices, why you walked away, why you said no, why you needed space, why you didn't react the way they wanted. And every time, the more you explained, the more confused you became. Not because you were wrong, but because you were trying to defend your truth to people who were never interested in understanding it. Men don't talk about this enough, how exhausting it is to shrink your decisions just so someone else won't feel insecure. How draining it is to constantly soften your tone so no one calls you rude, cold, or uncaring. How heavy it feels to repeatedly justify your intentions only for them to twist your words and rewrite the story anyway. Let me tell you what's really happening from a psychologist's perspective. People push you to explain yourself because explanations give them control. They want access to your mind, not to understand you, but to influence you. They want to know your reasoning so they can poke holes in it. They want your vulnerability so they can use it to steer your behavior. They want your explanations so they can make you doubt yourself. And deep down, you've known that. You've felt the disappointment that comes after oversharing, the regret that hits after you reveal too much, the frustration when your explanation only creates more arguments. That is your intuition screaming that the version of you who constantly justifies himself is not the man you were meant to become. When you stop explaining yourself, something shifts in the atmosphere around you. People suddenly pause before questioning you. They respect the boundaries you never even had to declare. Your presence becomes firmer, heavier, more stable. Not because you changed, but because you stopped giving away your power word by word. And maybe that's why you're here, because some part of you knows you're done handing out explanations like apologies. There is a psychological phenomenon most men never hear about, yet it shapes their entire social and relational reality: perceived authority. Authority isn't loud, it isn't aggressive, it isn't controlling. Authority is presence. And presence is created when a man speaks only when he chooses to, not when he feels pressured to justify himself. When you stop explaining yourself, the world doesn't just see you differently, it reorganizes itself around you. People begin to anticipate your words instead of interrupting them. They begin to observe your actions instead of questioning them. Your silence becomes more powerful than your explanations ever were. See, here's what most people won't admit out loud. When a man explains himself too much, others subconsciously categorize him as someone seeking approval. Maybe you don't mean it that way. Maybe you're just trying to avoid conflict. Maybe you're simply trying to be transparent. But the human mind is ancient, and it reads excessive explanation as uncertainty. And uncertainty in psychology weakens your social weight. This is why some men feel invisible, not because they lack intelligence or strength, but because they leak their confidence every time they defend decisions that don't need defending. You've probably experienced this. The more you explain, the more people challenge you. The more details you give, the more they dig for flaws. The more you try to clarify, the more they twist the story. It's not because they're smarter, it's because you opened the door. Women especially notice this in men, not because they're judging you harshly, but because female psychology is deeply wired to respond to certainty, direction, and calm emotional grounding. A man who knows who he is doesn't need to over-explain. And the moment you stop doing it, you trigger a shift in how women interpret you. Your energy becomes clearer, your boundaries become sharper, and your emotional independence becomes undeniable. But here's something deeper. When you stop explaining yourself, you begin to hear yourself. You hear your values without distortion. You hear your needs without guilt. You hear your instincts without second guessing. And that's when your life starts moving in the direction it should have been moving all along, because you're no longer negotiating with people who benefit from your confusion. You're no longer living on trial. You're no longer in the courtroom of someone else's expectations. You answer to yourself now. And when a man reaches that point, everything around him must shift. There's a moment in a man's life when silence becomes his greatest upgrade. Not the cold silence that shuts people out, but the steady silence that says, I know who I am, and I don't need your permission to be him. This silence is not emptiness. It's emotional discipline. It's the point where you stop trying to convince people of your intentions and start allowing them to reveal theirs. Because when you stop explaining yourself, people show you the truth you were blind to before. Pay attention to how they react. Someone who respects you won't demand justification. They'll listen. They'll adapt. They'll understand. Someone who benefits from your confusion will push harder, question deeper, twist your motives, and pretend they can't hear what you're actually saying. That reaction is not an accident. It's exposure. You've probably experienced this subtle shift before. The moment you go quiet, certain people suddenly get uncomfortable. Not because you did something wrong, but because they no longer have access to your inner world. They can't predict you. They can't sway you. They can't use your explanations as leverage. And for people who feed on control, your silence feels like starvation. But here is the part most men don't realize until much later. Your life becomes infinitely simpler when you stop narrating your decisions to people who aren't living them. You gain time. You gain energy. You gain clarity. Instead of explaining why you're working on yourself, you get stronger. Instead of defending why you walked away from toxic people, you feel lighter. Instead of justifying why you chose peace over chaos, you finally sleep at night. Explanations drain you because they force you into a performance designed to make the other person feel better at the cost of your own truth. And here's the psychological trap. When you perform long enough, you start to forget who you were before the performance began. But when you pull back, when you stop talking, stop defending, stop trying to be overly understood, your identity reforms. You meet yourself again. You stand taller without trying. You make decisions without hesitation. You create distance without guilt. This is the version of you that commands respect without forcing it. The version of you that women pay attention to without you proving your worth. The version of you that other men recognize, even if they never say it out loud. Silence reshapes your reputation, but more importantly, it reshapes you. Here's a truth most men avoid. Over-explaining is a form of emotional weakness disguised as politeness. You think you're being considerate, transparent, or fair. But in reality, every time you justify your choices, you're giving away your emotional leverage. You're showing that your value is negotiable. And human psychology doesn't reward negotiable value. It exploits it. Think about it. When you explain too much, you're essentially asking permission to exist on your own terms. You're offering access to your thought process, hoping it will be accepted, hoping it will be understood. And while that may sound noble, it is exactly what keeps men small, trapped, and anxious in relationships and social dynamics. The moment you stop explaining yourself, a subtle, almost invisible power emerges. It's not loud or showy. It doesn't need arguments or evidence. It's the power of presence, the kind that makes people stop and pay attention without you having to speak a single word more than necessary. Women, in particular, notice this instantly, sometimes consciously, often subconsciously. A man who doesn't feel the need to defend every choice radiates emotional strength. He is predictable in his calm, but unpredictable in his control. He isn't reactive, he's responsive, and that distinction changes everything in attraction, influence, and respect. Even in male friendships, this principle works. Men sense weakness in explanations. They sense uncertainty. They test boundaries unconsciously, probing for inconsistency or hesitation. But when you stop over-explaining, you create a magnetic clarity. You show them that you are self-contained, unshakable, and unmoved by unnecessary scrutiny. The biggest shift happens inside you. Your energy changes. Your confidence solidifies. You stop second-guessing every interaction. Every argument becomes less about proving yourself and more about observing reality. And paradoxically, that's when people start taking your perspective seriously. They see that you aren't reacting to theirs anymore. Let me be blunt. The world will try to pull you back into over-explaining, especially in relationships. It will guilt you, confuse you, and provoke you, and the first instinct will be to justify, clarify, or defend. Don't. Every word you withhold strengthens your identity. Every boundary you maintain without apology raises your influence. Every time you choose silence over explanation, you signal that your life is yours to live, not theirs to control. When you grasp this fully, you'll realize the simplest act can transform your life. Stop explaining yourself, because the man who masters this becomes untouchable, not arrogant, not distant, just undeniably in control of his own mind, his own choices, and his own peace. Let me tell you something most men never admit out loud. The act of over-explaining is not only exhausting, it's toxic to your own growth. Every time you justify your choices, you are unconsciously handing over pieces of your power. You give others the ability to doubt you, manipulate you, and shape your reality. And the scary part? Most men don't even notice they're doing it until they feel completely drained, frustrated, or unseen. When you stop explaining yourself, a strange thing happens. People start noticing your energy, not because you are performing or forcing respect, but because your energy is unaltered, no longer diluted by the need for approval. Your presence demands attention. Your words carry weight because they are measured. Your silence commands respect because it is intentional. And the women around you, they sense this immediately. It's magnetic because it signals security, self-respect, and a clarity most men never develop. Notice the patterns in your life. Who tests you the most? It's always the people who benefit from your confusion. The ones who challenge, question, or twist your actions are doing it because they are used to access you. Access to your explanations, your vulnerabilities, your justifications. Once that access is removed, they have to confront reality. You are no longer available for manipulation. This is where your personal evolution accelerates. When you stop explaining, you start filtering people automatically. Those who respect your boundaries stay. Those who don't drift away or reveal their true intentions. Your circle becomes sharper, cleaner, more aligned with your values. And every interaction becomes less about negotiation and more about observation. Here's the paradox most men struggle to understand. By withholding explanations, you increase influence, not diminish it. Your decisions no longer require validation. Your actions no longer need justification. People are drawn to certainty, even if they can't articulate why. And that certainty comes from being grounded in yourself, not from trying to convince anyone else. The more you practice this, the more natural it becomes. Boundaries are no longer uncomfortable. They are your default. Confidence isn't forced. It's inherent. You no longer chase approval. It comes to you organically. And every relationship, every encounter, every opportunity transforms because you operate from a space of power instead of plea. And here's the final critical insight. The shift doesn't just affect others, it transforms how you see yourself. When you stop defending, clarifying, and justifying, you finally live without mental chains. You finally hear your own instincts, trust your own decisions, and experience freedom few men ever truly feel. Now, here's the final truth most men never fully grasp. Stopping the need to explain yourself isn't just a strategy, it's a psychological upgrade. It rewires how people perceive you, how you perceive yourself, and how your relationships function. Once you internalize this, your life doesn't just improve, it evolves into a version you didn't think was possible. Think about the countless times you felt drained after arguing, justifying, or defending your choices. The moments when your words were twisted, your intentions misunderstood, your decisions questioned. All that energy lost, all that mental space occupied, all that clarity diluted, and all of it was unnecessary. When you stop explaining yourself, something almost magical happens. People adjust to your rhythm. Your presence is no longer negotiable. Your boundaries are no longer up for debate. Your decisions are no longer subject to approval. This doesn't make you cold. It makes you whole. And wholeness is irresistible because it radiates stability, strength, and clarity. You'll notice women and men alike respond differently. They sense certainty. They sense self-respect. They notice a quiet authority you never had to declare. And here's the thing most men never admit. The respect, attention, and attraction you've been chasing outside yourself was always waiting inside you. It just required a refusal to justify your existence to anyone else. But this is not about ego or arrogance. It's about power, clarity, and freedom. It's about aligning your life with your values instead of someone else's expectations. It's about trusting your instincts, following your purpose, and letting people adjust to you instead of the other way around. Every word you withhold builds the version of you who commands respect effortlessly, who navigates relationships without apology, who makes decisions without hesitation, and who feels peace without explanation. And now I want to challenge you personally. Think about one area of your life where you constantly explain yourself, maybe with a partner, a friend, or a coworker. Now imagine if you stopped explaining, stopped justifying, and simply acted from your truth. What would that look like? What would change? Take a moment to calculate it in your mind and write your answer in the comments below. If this truth hit you, if it resonated, do this now. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share it with a friend who desperately needs to stop giving their power away. Because the moment you stop explaining yourself, everything changes, and that change starts with you.